They thought their secret was buried forever, that the system they controlled would let them steal the last thing my mother had left me. But what they didn't know was that I had just found the one thing that could shatter their entire world. My name is Judith Parker. I'm a 30-year-old attorney from Boston, and I was facing the most important case of my life, against my own father. The courtroom fell silent as I watched him exchange knowing glances with Judge Wilson. Their smirks confirmed my worst fear. They thought they had already won. What they didn't know was that 3 days earlier, I discovered something hidden in my late mother Eleanor's antique desk, a secret that would shatter their confidence forever. Growing up as Thomas Parker's daughter meant living in two different worlds. Publicly, he was a respected defense attorney, his name in legal journals, his firm in a gleaming Boston skyscraper. But behind the heavy oak doors of our Cambridge home, he was controlling, micromanaging every part of our lives. My mother, Eleanor, was his opposite. Where he was loud and demanding, she was quiet but resolute. She could stand her ground without ever raising her voice. I remember countless dinners where he'd rant about his cases or criticize my grades, and she'd just meet my eyes across the table. Her silent support kept me afloat. "Your father wants what's best for you," she'd tell me later. "He just has a different way of showing it." But even as a child, I saw the strain in her smile. Their marriage started to visibly crack when I turned 16. The arguments got more frequent, no longer hidden. Father stayed at the office later. Mother found reasons to be out of the house. The tension was so thick you could feel it pressing on your skin. Then, during my junior year, I found out why. I stopped by his office after school for concert tickets. His secretary was away, so I knocked on his door. When no one answered, I pushed it open, and I saw him with Jennifer, his 26-year-old legal assistant. They sprang apart. Father smoothed his tie, annoyed, not embarrassed. "We were just reviewing case files," he said. I didn't say a word. I just turned and walked out. That night, I told my mother. She just nodded, like I'd confirmed something she'd long suspected. "I'm sorry you had to see that, sweetheart," she said, holding me tight. 2 weeks later, she filed for divorce, and that's when I saw my father's true ruthlessness. He took the divorce as a personal attack. He used every legal trick to punish her for leaving. He contested everything. He produced documents claiming he'd paid for everything, that she'd contributed nothing. He said she was emotionally unstable. It got worse. He used his connections. Judges he golfed with presided over hearings. Evidence my mother submitted would mysteriously get filed wrong. Her first attorney withdrew after a suspiciously lucrative job offer. When it was over, my mother got a tiny settlement, just enough for a down payment on a small house in a modest neighborhood. He kept the Cambridge home, the Cape Cod property, almost all the investments. She never complained. She found work, rebuilt her life. She even encouraged me to have a relationship with him, though it was so hard watching him thrive while she struggled. I went to Northwestern for pre-law against his wishes. He threatened to cut me off, but I had scholarships. I was willing to take loans. My defiance created another fracture. I only saw him on holidays for tense, passive-aggressive dinners. He'd married Jennifer by then, who awkwardly tried to connect with me. But my relationship with my mother deepened. She never used me as a pawn, never spoke ill of him. We spoke every week. Summers I stayed with her. Then 3 years ago she called me in Chicago. Devastating news. Stage 4 ovarian cancer. The prognosis was grim. I didn't hesitate. I took a leave and moved back to Boston. Those final months were heartbreaking and precious. As the cancer weakened her body, her spirit seemed to grow stronger. We had long talks about life, forgiveness, and peace. Not once was she bitter. "Life is too short to carry around anger, Judith," she told me one evening. "I have had a good life. I have you, and that has been my greatest joy." She passed away peacefully 6 months later, with me holding her hand. She left me everything she had. It was modest but meaningful. Her small house, her savings, family heirlooms. The most precious was her mother's antique mahogany desk. At her funeral, I was shocked to see my father and Jennifer arrive. He hadn't visited her once during her illness, yet there he was in a perfect black suit, giving condolences to people he hadn't spoken to in years. After the service, he approached me. "Judith, I am sorry for your loss," he said, like we were strangers. "Your mother was a good woman." I thanked him stiffly, just wanting him to leave. Then he added, and his words sent a chill right through me. "We should discuss the estate soon. I have concerns about Eleanor's mental state in her final months. The medication, it affects decision-making." Before I could respond, he handed me his business card and walked away. I was stunned. He was laying the groundwork to contest the will, to take the little she had managed to build. The nightmare began. 2 weeks later, at her attorney's office, my father arrived with Gerald Thompson, a shark-like probate lawyer. The will was straightforward. She left everything to me, but as the reading finished, my father cleared his throat. "I will be contesting this will." I hired Sarah Goldstein, a law school friend who specialized in probate. She said the will was solid. Then she checked the case assignment and frowned. "Judge Wilson, do you know if your father has connections with him?" My stomach dropped. "I'm not sure." "Why?" "They went to Harvard together, same country club, investment properties together. Isn't that a conflict?" "Absolutely." "We'll file a motion for recusal." It didn't matter. At our first hearing, Judge Wilson was blatantly biased. He interrupted Sarah constantly, but gave Thompson his full attention. Our motion for him to recuse himself, he presided over it himself and denied it. I have known Thomas Parker for 30 years, but I am perfectly capable of impartial judgment. It was a lie, and everyone knew it. The weeks got more surreal. Information from our private meetings reached my father's team instantly. Witnesses who agreed to testify for us suddenly became unavailable. Wilson approved all of Thompson's motions and denied ours on technicalities. Sarah was frustrated. "Judith, we're fighting a stacked deck. Wilson will never rule for us. Maybe we should settle, save something." "No," I said, firm. "This isn't just about money. It's about honoring my mother. She fought him once and lost because of his connections. I won't let that happen again." She was right, it got uglier. Discovery was a nightmare. They demanded decades of financial records, medical history, personal letters, all approved by Wilson to drain us. Mother's friends who agreed to testify got strange, threatening calls. One had her tire slashed. During my own deposition, my father sat there smug as Thompson grilled me for 8 hours, fishing for anything to twist. "Did you suggest the changes to her will? Did you ever administer her medication?" Through it all, my father watched with a slight smile, never meeting my eyes. By the 4th month, I was exhausted and nearly broke. "We need to be realistic." Sarah told me after another disastrous hearing, "We're going to lose. Wilson will probably award legal fees against you, too. You could end up owing your father money." That night, I sat in my mother's living room, defeated. This might be the last time I was here. Soon it would belong to him. The unfairness crushed me. I had fought so hard, but how do you win when your opponents control the game? I didn't know. Everything was about to change. With the final hearing days away, I went to her house, maybe for the last time. I moved through the rooms, taking small keepsakes. I ended up at her antique mahogany desk. I was wiping it down when my cloth caught on something underneath. I got on my knees. There was a small, almost invisible wooden knob. I pulled it. A panel slid open. A hidden compartment. Inside was a sealed manila envelope, yellowed with age. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were official documents with government seals, black and white photographs, and a small leather-bound journal. The documents were naval intelligence records. My mother's name, Eleanor Marie Kessler, was listed as a communications specialist with a high-security clearance. She'd never told me. The photos showed a young woman in a naval uniform, my mother, standing with a group, and with a jolt, I recognized two of the men, my father and Judge Wilson, decades younger. The journal was the real shock, entries from the late 80s documenting her work. She expressed growing ethical concerns. One passage leaped out. T&W have expanded surveillance beyond authorized targets. I am uncomfortable, but feel powerless to object. T&W, Thomas and Walter, She wrote about an Operation Kingfisher. The final entries described her decision to leave. I can no longer participate. I have secured copies of key communications as insurance. The verification code Autumn Sentinel would prove my involvement. I pray I never need to use it. I sat on the floor, surrounded by papers, my mind reeling. My quiet mother had been an intelligence specialist. She had worked with my father and Wilson, and something had happened, something bad enough that she kept evidence. The journal mentioned a trusted colleague, Barbara Linden. I found her online and called. She was cautious, but agreed to meet. At a coffee shop, I showed her what I'd found. She grew tense. Your mother left that life behind. She never wanted you to know. I need to understand. What was Operation Kingfisher? After a long hesitation, she leaned in, her voice low. It started as legitimate surveillance, but they expanded it. Americans, politicians, judges, business leaders. The information wasn't for national security. It was for personal advancement. Your mother saw everything, and the incident I prompted, her expression darkened. A civilian died, questionable circumstances, the official record lied. Their actions led to that death, and they covered it up. She wrote a name on a napkin, Commander Phillips. He was in charge before they pushed him out. He knows more. But be careful, Judith. These men are dangerous. I found Phillips in a remote Vermont cabin. He was very military, straight. Why are you here? He demanded. I showed him the photos, the journal. He remained stone-faced, proves nothing. Then I said the words, "Does the phrase Autumn Sentinel mean anything to you?" His head snapped up. Where did you hear that? It was in my mother's journal. A verification code. He poured 2 whiskeys, his hand steady but his eyes telling a different story. He confirmed it all. Operation Kingfisher, the illegal surveillance for blackmail, the journalist who died during an unauthorized break-in, a death covered up, Autumn Sentinel, he explained. Was the verification code for the secure logs. Only someone with insider knowledge would know it. It's proof. He gave me authentication phrases, details only someone with the full logs would know. But understand, he warned, this information is still classified. Using it could have consequences for you, too. I don't care, I said. They've left me no choice. The morning of the final hearing, I put on my Navy suit, my mother's pearl earrings. In the mirror, I saw determination, not defeat. In the courtroom, it played out exactly as expected. Thompson gave his masterful, distorted arguments. Wilson nodded along. Sarah presented our solid case, and Wilson dismantled it, interrupting, dismissing our witnesses. He was about to rule against us. Based on the evidence, this court finds significant reason to question the validity of Eleanor Parker. Will, something in me snapped. I stood. Your Honor, I request permission to address the court. He was furious. Return to your seat immediately, or I'll hold you in contempt. I walked to the witness stand, my heart pounding. I leaned into the microphone. My voice was clear and measured in the tense silence. Autumn Sentinel. Operation Kingfisher. The effect was instant and total. Wilson's face went white. The gavel slipped from his hand and clattered on the bench. My father rose from his seat, his mouth open in pure shock. How? Wilson stammered, his composure shattered. How do you know that name? I found my mother's documentation. I said calmly. She kept very detailed records, including verification codes and authenticated logs. The courtroom erupted. Wilson, panicked, called for a recess and fled. The hearing was postponed. Later, in a private conference room, my father confronted me. The confident man was gone, replaced by someone frightened and old. What have you done? He whispered. I found Mother's insurance policy. He tried to bluster, to threaten. He called it national security. I didn't back down. I told him what I knew, the expanded surveillance, the journalist, the cover-up. His facade crumbled. What do you want? He finally asked, defeated. What Mother wanted, justice. You drop all claims. You publicly acknowledge her will is valid. You apologize, and Wilson recusses himself. Or I go public with everything. He agreed. By the next day, all claims were withdrawn. Judge Wilson recused himself, then quickly took a medical leave. The new judge validated the will in minutes. It was over. I had won. But secrets, once disturbed, rarely go back to sleep. The legal community started asking questions. The connections between my father and Wilson were too obvious to ignore. Investigations began. Wilson resigned from the bench in disgrace. My father's firm dissolved. His reputation was ashes. I watched his downfall from a distance. I felt no joy, only the quiet certainty of a long-delayed reckoning. I used part of the inheritance to start the Judith Parker Justice Initiative to help others fight judicial corruption. I reconnected with my mother's friends, learning about the strong, courageous woman she was long before I was born. I found peace, not because I destroyed my father, but because I had stood my ground with integrity, just like she taught me. Her quiet strength had guided me. Now it was my turn to carry it forward. Winning the case was supposed to feel like an ending, a closed chapter, but life isn't a courtroom. There's no gavel that signaled a true finish. The silence after the storm was almost louder than the battle itself. In the weeks that followed, the public unraveling of my father and Judge Wilson became a slow, relentless tide. The story, once a private war fought in confidential hearings, was now a public spectacle. News outlets dug deeper. The Boston Globe ran a feature, Ties That Bind, the Parker-Wilson Connection and Questions of Judicial Integrity. It didn't mention Operation Kingfisher. I'd kept that promise, but it meticulously mapped their financial entanglements and the suspicious pattern of rulings in my father's favor over the years. The State Bar Association's investigation expanded. Former clients, emboldened by the headlines, came forward with their own stories of evidence that went missing, witnesses who turned hostile, and settlements that felt coerced. My father's world, built so carefully on influence and intimidation, was crumbling from the inside out. I received a call from one of his former partners, a man named Robert who had always been kind to me as a child. His voice was strained. "Judith, the firm. We can't survive this. We're dissolving the practice. I'm sorry it's come to this. I heard the unspoken accusation, you did this, and part of me, a part I wasn't proud of, agreed. I drove past his downtown skyscraper one afternoon. Seeing his name being physically removed from the building facade was a surreal, hollow victory. The man who had defined himself by that name, that prestige, was now an attorney taking court-appointed cases. The irony was a bitter pill. Jennifer's divorce filing was swift and merciless. The prenup he'd insisted upon, designed to protect his assets, now protected hers. She moved out of the Cambridge house. Within a month, I heard through the grapevine she'd relocated to New York. I didn't blame her. She was just another casualty of his hunger for control. Through it all, he never called to yell or accuse. The silence from him was the most telling sign of his defeat. The puppet master had lost his strings. My life, meanwhile, was slowly filling with a new purpose. The Judith Parker Justice Initiative found its first clients, a small business owner being crushed by a rival with deep political ties, and a family fighting a wrongful foreclosure where the judge had clear connections to the bank. The work was exhausting, but it was a clean exhaustion. We were fighting the disease in the system, not just the symptoms. It was during this time that Michael, the architecture professor, became a steady presence. He didn't know the full, classified depth of my story, and he never pressed. Simply saw the person I was trying to become in the aftermath. One evening, while we were planting a new rose bush in my mother's garden, a variety called Eleanor's Promise, he looked at me and said, "You have her hands. The way you work the soil. It's gentle but sure." It was the greatest compliment anyone had ever given me. Months after the case, a plain, legal-sized envelope arrived with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a handwritten note. "Judith, I heard about the foundation, a fitting tribute. She would be proud of the woman you've become. The past is a country we can never return to. Some borders are best left uncrossed. C.P. Commander Phillips." It was his way of checking in, of giving his quiet approval. I tucked the note into my mother's journal, a secret between the two people who had understood the full cost of her silence. The final confrontation with my past came on a rainy Tuesday in autumn. I was working from home when the doorbell rang. I opened the door, and there he stood, my father. He looked ordinary, dressed in a simple raincoat, without the armor of an expensive suit. He was thinner, and the arrogance that usually held his posture rigid was gone. He just looked tired. "Can I come in?" he asked, his voice softer than I remembered. I stepped back, letting him into the home he had tried so hard to take from me. He didn't sit, just stood in the living room, his eyes taking in the familiar furniture, the photographs of my mother. "She loved this room," he said, almost to himself. "She did," I replied, my arms crossed. A long silence stretched between us, filled with all the unsaid things of a decade. "I'm not here to make excuses, Judith," he began, his gaze fixed on a picture of the three of us from when I was maybe 7. We looked happy. I wondered if we ever really were. "I'm not even here to ask for forgiveness. I know that's too much. Then why are you here?" He finally turned to look at me, to see you, to acknowledge what I did to you and to her. He took a shaky breath. "I built my life on a foundation of sand. I confused power with respect, control with love. And I lost everything that actually mattered because of it." He was saying all the right things, the things I had longed to hear for years. But now that I was hearing them, they felt like words in a foreign language. I understood their meaning, but they held no emotional weight for me. "The bar is disbarring me," he stated flatly. "The decision is final next week." I simply nodded. There was nothing to say. "I am sorry, Judith." For all of it, I believed he was sorry. Sorry he got caught. Sorry he lost. Sorry his legacy was ruined. But I wasn't sure he was sorry for the pain he'd caused. That would require an empathy he had never possessed. "Thank you for saying that," I said, my voice neutral. It was all I could offer. He seemed to understand that this was the end of the road. He gave a small, resigned nod and turned to leave. At the door he paused, the name of the foundation. "It's good. She deserved that." And then he was gone, disappearing into the gray rain. I closed the door and leaned against it, expecting a flood of tears or rage. But it didn't come. Instead, I felt a profound and simple clarity. The chapter was finally, truly closed, not with a dramatic courtroom reveal, but with a quiet conversation in the home my mother had built for herself. The home I had fought for and now, finally, could just live in. The war was over. The healing, the real, slow work of building a life not defined by that battle, could now begin. The strange thing about peace, after a long war, is how quiet it is. There's no fanfare, no final verdict read aloud. You just wake up one morning and the weight you've carried for so long feels a little lighter. The public story of my father and Judge Wilson eventually faded from the headlines. The news cycle moved on, but the consequences were permanent. My father was officially disbarred. The final notice came in the mail, a single, cold page that erased his professional life with bureaucratic efficiency. I felt a pang of something, not satisfaction, but a grim sense of finality. The great Thomas Parker was now just a private citizen. He sold the Cambridge house. I heard he moved to a condo in the suburbs. Our paths didn't cross. The silence between us became a permanent state, and I was finally okay with that. Some relationships aren't meant to be mended. They're just part of the landscape of your past. Mountain you had to climb that now sits in the rearview mirror. My life, in contrast, was blossoming in ways I never could have imagined during those dark months of litigation. The Eleanor Parker Justice Initiative wasn't just a tribute anymore. It was a thriving, vital organization. We took on our most ambitious case yet, representing a community group against a developer with deep political pockets. It was David and Goliath, but this time we had better stones, and we won. The local paper called it a stunning victory for the little guy. I cut out the article and put it on my refrigerator, right next to a childhood photo of my mother. I thought she'd appreciate the juxtaposition. Michael and I grew closer. He never treated me like I was fragile or broken from my past. He saw the strength it had forged. One evening, over dinner at his messy blueprint-covered apartment, he said, "You have a way of seeing the underlying structure of things, Judith. Not just in law, but in people. It's like you can see the load-bearing walls." It was the most architect-like compliment I'd ever received, and it meant the world to me. Then, one rainy Saturday, I was going through the last of the boxes from my mother's attic. I thought I'd found every secret that desk held, but tucked inside an old yearbook, I found one last letter. It was addressed to me in her elegant handwriting, The date on it was just a week before she passed. My hands shook as I opened it. My dearest Judith, if you're reading this, it means you've probably had to fight for this house. And it means I was right to worry. I always knew your father might try to challenge my will. His ego could never stand the idea that I had something he didn't control. I also know you. I know your fire, your sense of justice. You would have fought him with everything you have, and that is why I need to tell you this. Whatever you may discover about the past, about my life before you, know that I made my choices for us, for our future. I chose peace over vengeance. I chose protecting you over exposing him. You might find that foolish, but a life spent fighting is no life at all. I had my battle, and I made my peace. Do not let my history become a weapon that destroys your future. Use your strength to build, Judith, not just to break. The greatest joy of my life was being your mother. You are, and always will be, my Eleanor's promise. All my love, Mom. I sat on the floor of the attic, the letter pressed to my chest, and I cried. I cried for the mother I missed so desperately. I cried for the burdens she'd carried alone, and I cried with relief because in her words I found the final piece of my own absolution. She wasn't weak for keeping her secrets. She was powerful enough to choose her own kind of victory. A quiet life, a daughter she loved, a home filled with peace. I had chosen a different path, a public fight, a measured exposure of the truth, and she was telling me from beyond that that was okay too. She was giving me her blessing. That letter was her final gift. It wasn't a weapon or a secret. It was a mother's love, timeless and unwavering. It was the closure I didn't know I was still searching for. The story ends here, not with a dramatic reveal, but with a quiet understanding in a dusty attic. Battle forged me, but it was her love that ultimately saved me. And now, I finally get to just live. People ask me sometimes what happened after, as if the story ended when the credits rolled. But life isn't a movie. The most important chapters are often the ones that come after the dramatic climax, the ones about rebuilding. The initiative became my life's work. We weren't just fighting legal battles anymore. We were building a network. We started a mentorship program for young lawyers who wanted to practice law with a conscience, not just a business card. I called it the Eleanor's Promise of Fellowship. The first time I stood in front of a room of bright-eyed, idealistic law students, all of them looking to me for guidance, I felt my mother's presence so strongly it took my breath away. I wasn't just preserving her memory, I was multiplying it. My relationship with Michael deepened. He never once saw me as the woman who took down her father. He saw the woman who planted a garden, who burned dinner, who loved old black and white movies. We bought a house together, not my mother's, which I kept and rented to a lovely young family, but ours. A place with no ghosts, only future memories. The day we moved in, we ate pizza on the floor, surrounded by boxes, and it felt more like a home than any perfectly furnished room ever had. And then, about 2 years after the final hearing, I received a letter. It was from a woman named Clara, living in a small town in Ohio. She'd seen a news segment about the initiative and wrote to me in careful, looping handwriting. Dear MS. Parker, it began. Your story gave me the courage to fight my own landlord, a powerful man in our town who thought I had no voice. I used your mother's words. The ones you shared online. Life is too short to carry around anger. I didn't fight him with rage. I fought him with the truth, and I won. Thank you for showing me how. I framed that letter. It sits on my desk next to my mother's picture. That's the real legacy. It's not about bringing powerful men to their knees. It's about helping one person find their footing. As for my father, I heard through an old acquaintance that he started a small consulting firm, advising on ethics and law. The irony was almost poetic. I didn't reach out. The bridge between us wasn't burned with anger. It had simply been dismantled, plank by plank, over the years, and there was no need to cross it anymore. I truly wished him peace. From a distance, letting go of that last bit of resentment was the final gift I gave myself. The past is a place I visit sometimes, but I don't live there anymore. My life is here in the present, in the work that matters, in the love I've built. My story started with a secret in a desk and a fight. Justice, but it's ending. Or rather, it's continuing, with something much simpler and much stronger, a life of purpose, and for that I have my mother to thank. There's a question I've been asking myself lately. What does a happily ever after actually look like? It's not a castle. It's not perfect, pain-free life for me. It looks like this. It's a quiet evening, the soft weight of this blanket, the smell of old books and the faint sound of Michael humming in the kitchen. It's the profound, ordinary piece of a life that is finally, completely my own. The initiative is thriving. Under new leadership now, one of our first Elinor's Promise of Fellows. Stepping back was the hardest and best decision I've made. It proved the foundation was solid, that it wasn't just about my story anymore. It was about the principle, and principles have to outlive the people who first championed them. My mother's house. I sold it last year. It was time. The young family who rented it fell in love with it, and I knew they would fill its rooms with new joy. It had served its purpose for both my mother and me. It gave her sanctuary, and it gave me a battle worth fighting. Letting it go felt like releasing a deep breath I'd been holding for a decade. Before I handed over the keys, I spent one last afternoon there. I sat on the porch where my mother and I had watched so many sunsets, and I realized her legacy was never in the walls or the deed. It was in me. It's in the way I choose kindness over being right, the way I listen before I speak, the way I now understand that the strongest power isn't control, but compassion. A few months ago, I was going through a box of my own old things and found a picture of my father and me at a school science fair. I was 10, beaming with pride, and he had his hand on my shoulder. He was smiling, not the polished, public smile, but a real one. For a long time, that photo brought me nothing but pain, a reminder of what was lost. But that day, I could look at it and feel a quiet sadness, yes, but also a sense of grace. I can finally hold the good memories without letting the bad ones poison them. I've made peace with the ghost of the father he could have been. My story began with a war in a courtroom, a hidden compartment, and 4 whispered words that changed everything. But if I've learned anything, it's this: the victory wasn't in winning the case. It wasn't in the downfall of powerful men. The victory is in this quiet moment right now. It's in the love I've built. It's in the peace I cultivated, the little girl who felt powerless, the young woman who was so angry. She's still a part of me, but she's not driving the car anymore. She's a passenger, finally able to look out the window and appreciate the view. So this is my happily ever after. It's messy, and it's imperfect, and it's real. It's a life built not on the ruins of the past, but with the lessons I learned there, and for that I am endlessly grateful. I thought my story was over. I'd found my peace, built my life. But the past has a gentle way of circling back, not with a shout, but with a whisper. This arrived last week. No return address, just my name written in a familiar, precise handwriting I hadn't seen in years. My father's. My heart didn't pound. There was no panic, just a quiet curiosity. I opened it, and inside was a single, folded sheet of paper, a check, a substantial one made out to the Judith Parker Justice Initiative, and a note, just one sentence, for the ones who can't fight for themselves. TP, no request, no demand for reconciliation, just an offering, a contribution, an acknowledgement in the only language he had left, that the work I was doing had value, that her legacy had value. I didn't cash it immediately. I sat with it for a day. I thought about the irony, the symmetry. The resources he once used to break my mother were now being used to fuel the very foundation that upheld her name. And then I did something I never thought I would. I didn't call. I drove. He lives in a small, unassuming condo, just like I'd heard. I rang the bell. When he opened the door, he looked surprised but not shocked. He just nodded and stepped aside. The condo was sparse, neat. There were a few law books on a shelf, but also novels, a history of naval architecture, a man I was meeting for the first time. Thank you for the donation, I said, standing in his living room. It's a good cause, he replied, his voice even. We didn't talk about the past. We didn't talk about my mother or the trial or Operation Kingfisher. We talked for 20 minutes about the unseasonably warm weather, about a book he was reading, about the Red Sox's chances this year. It was the most mundane and the most profound conversation we'd ever had. There was no grand reconciliation, no tearful embrace, but there was a truce, a silent agreement that the war was so far behind us, we could no longer see the battlefield. As I stood to leave, he He walked me to the door. "Judith," he said, and I paused. He looked at me, really looked at me, and for a fleeting second, I saw the ghost of the man from the science fair photo. "You've done well. It wasn't 'I'm sorry', it wasn't 'I love you', but it was something true, and for now, in this new, quiet chapter of our lives, it was enough." I drove home as the sun was setting. The check is now framed, hanging in the lobby of the initiative next to Clara's letter. 2 testaments to how a story can change course, one from a stranger I helped, and one from the man I once had to fight. My story began with a battle for a house. It became a fight for justice. It transformed into a journey toward peace, and now I think it's finally become a story about grace. The grace to let go, the grace to accept a complicated peace, the grace to understand that some endings aren't about neat conclusions, but about a quiet, steady light that continues to shine long after the storm has passed. This is the last page, not with a period, but with a gentle, closing line. Thank you for reading it with me. I used to think closure was something you found, like a key to a locked door. You just had to search hard enough for it. But I've learned something in these last few years of quiet sunrises and ordinary Tuesdays. Closure isn't something you find, it's something you build, day by day, with the choices you make. The initiative is running itself now, a beautiful, self-sustaining machine for good. My father's donation was matched by a local foundation, and we were able to open a second office. I go in once a week, not as the director, but as a mentor. I get to be the quiet, steady presence my mother was for me, for a new generation of fighters. Michael and I got married. It was a small ceremony right here in this garden. We didn't have a traditional aisle. People just stood around us in a circle. My vows were simple. I promised to always choose a life with him over winning an argument. He promised to always make sure I remembered to eat when I was working too hard. It was perfect, and a few months ago, I found myself standing in a baby's room, painting the walls a soft, buttery yellow. We're expecting a daughter in the fall. As I painted, I thought about the legacy of names. She won't be named Elinor. That name belongs to my mother, and her story is complete. Our daughter will have her own name, her own story to write, but she will know her grandmother. She will know her as the woman whose courage is in the foundation of this house, in the principles of the work we do, in the love that surrounds her. My father knows. I sent him a brief, simple note, just the due date. He sent back a tiny, beautifully carved wooden rattle. No note was needed. It sits on the dresser, a simple, silent acknowledgement of a new beginning, of a line continuing. There are no more hidden compartments, no more whispered words in courtrooms. The great drama of my life has settled into a deep, abiding contentment. The battles I fight now are for the best parking spot at the grocery store, or over what to have for dinner, and I've never been happier. This will be my last video, not because the story is over, but because the next chapter is too precious, too private, to be a story for the world. It's a story for a little girl, for her father, and for me. Thank you for listening, for your support, for sharing your own stories in the comments. You helped a woman who felt alone remember that she wasn't. You were part of my journey from a battlefield to a garden. Wherever you are in your own story, remember this. Your peace is coming. It might not look like you expect. It might be quiet and simple and built by your own hands, but it is coming. Have faith. This is Judith Parker, signing off with a heart so full, it feels like it could light up the sky. Be well. I thought I had said everything there was to say. I thought I had laid my past to rest. But life, I've learned, has a way of bringing you full circle, not with a crash, but with a whisper. A few weeks ago, on a day much like this one, I was pushing my daughter, Clara, on the swings. Her little hands were wrapped tightly around the chains, and she was shrieking with that pure, uncomplicated joy that only children possess. I was completely lost in that moment in her, and then I saw him. He was standing maybe 50 feet away, just watching, not approaching, just there. My father. He looked older, frailer than the man in the condo. The wind ruffled his thin hair. He was just a man in a park. Our eyes met across the playground. There was no smile, no nod, just a long, quiet look. He saw me, he saw my daughter, he saw the life I had built without him, and then he did the most surprising thing of all. He gave the smallest, almost imperceptible tilt of his head. It wasn't a greeting, it was release, an acknowledgement that this happiness, this peace, was mine, and he would not intrude upon it. He turned and he walked away, and I felt, Nothing but a quiet, final sense of closure. There was no anger left to let go of, no forgiveness I needed to grant. The war was so far behind us it had become a story in a book I once read. In that moment, he was just a ghost from another life, finally, peacefully, fading away. I turned my attention back to my daughter. Higher, Mama. She squealed, and I pushed her higher towards the sun. My story was never really about a courtroom, or a hidden journal, or bringing down powerful men. Those were just the plot points. The story was always about this, about finding the quiet after the storm, about learning that the greatest victory isn't in the battle you win, but in the peace you get to live in afterwards. It was about becoming my mother's daughter, not in her silence, but in her strength. And now, it's about being my daughter's mother, and giving her a story that begins with love and ends with joy, with no battles in between. This is the true ending, not mine, but ours. Wherever you are, whatever you're fighting, your peace is waiting for you. It's in a quiet morning. It's in a loved one's smile. It's in the courage to finally let go. Go find it. This is Judith Parker, wishing you all the peace your heart can hold. Goodbye. I found one last secret. I thought I'd found everything this old desk had to give, but yesterday, while Clara was napping, a sliver of wood caught my sweater. I investigated and found this. There's no date, no note on the back, but I know she's pregnant with me. All those years through the difficult marriage, the divorce, the struggle, she kept this one pure picture of joy, a moment of pure anticipation, of love for the life she was carrying. She hid it away, not with the weapons she kept for protection, but with this testament to hope. I showed it to Clara tonight at bedtime. She pointed her tiny finger at the photo. Gamma, she asked. Yes, my love. I told her, my voice thick. That's Gamma, and that's you in a way. That's the hope for you. Clara just smiled, a simple, accepting smile, and snuggled deeper into her blankets. And in that moment, I understood the final lesson my mother had been trying to teach me. A lesson that couldn't be learned in the fury of a courtroom, or the thrill of uncovering a secret. It could only be learned in the quiet of a nursery. The fight was never the point. The secrets were never the point. The point was always the love. The quiet, stubborn, enduring love that survives every battle, outlasts every betrayal, and is passed down, mother to daughter, like a sacred, unbreakable thread. The point was her, and now the point is me, and the point is Clara. The story ends here, not because it's over, but because it has finally truly begun again. Look for the quiet joys. They outshine the loudest battles. Hold on to them. They are your true inheritance. Thank you for walking this path with me. My story is told. Now go and live yours. I used to come here with questions. I'd stand at this spot and ask for a sign, for strength, for the next clue in the puzzle she left behind. I don't have questions anymore. Today, I just came to say thank you. Thank you for the quiet strength you showed me, not in grand gestures, but in 1,000 small ways. The way you'd hum while washing dishes. The way your eyes would crinkle at the corners when you smiled. The way you made even the most ordinary Tuesday feel like a safe harbor. The battles we fought, yours and mine, they shaped me, they honed me, but they don't define me anymore. What defines me now is the smell of soil in my garden, the weight of my daughter's head on my shoulder when she falls asleep, the sound of my husband's key in the door at the end of the day, the profound, breathtaking beauty of an ordinary, peaceful life. You gave me that. You fought for a world where that could be possible for me, even when it wasn't for you. And I am living in that world you dreamed of. So this isn't a goodbye, it's a completion. The circle is closed. The love you planted in me has taken root, and it's blooming in a new generation. Clara has your smile. I see it every day. Your story is part of me. But my story, it's my own now, and it's a happy one. Rest well, Mom. Your work here is done. There's a saying that we are the stories we tell. For so long, my story was one of conflict, of a hidden journal, a courtroom, a fight for justice, but that was just one chapter. The real story, the one that matters, is so much simpler. It's the story my daughter tells when she draws our family under a smiling sun. It's the story my husband tells when he brings me coffee in my favorite mug. One that says world's okayest lawyer. It's the story I tell myself when I wake up to a morning so quiet and so full of ordinary grace that it feels like a miracle. The antique desk sits in my study now. The hidden compartment is empty. It holds no more secrets, only my pens and my notepaper. It's Just a beautiful old piece of furniture, its purpose fulfilled. The weapons have been put away, the war is a memory. I don't think about the whispers in the courtroom anymore. I think about the whisper of the wind in the trees outside my window. I don't think about the sting of betrayal. I feel the warmth of the sun on my face. My father passed away last year. It was peaceful, I'm told. We hadn't spoken in a long time. When I heard the news, I felt a quiet sadness for what could never be and a profound gratitude for what is, for the family I have, for the love that surrounds me. The peace I fought so hard to win. My story is no longer about Judith Parker, the attorney who fought her father. It is about Judith, the mother, the wife, the gardener, the woman who finally learned that the greatest victory is not in the grand, dramatic stand, but in the million small, quiet moments of a life well loved. This is the final page, not because the story is over, but because it has been fully told. The conflict has been resolved. The character has found her peace. There is nothing left to say except, this is what happiness looks like. If you are in the middle of your fight, may you find the strength to see it through. And may you know, with every fiber of your being, that a peaceful shore is waiting for you on the other side. Your story is still being written. Make it a good one. Thank you for everything. Be well. The story of Judith Parker is not one of vengeance, but of reclamation. It is a testament to the fact that the most powerful battles are not always fought with public exposure and spectacular falls from grace, but with the quiet, unwavering courage to confront the past and choose a different future. Judith's journey began in the shadow of her father's manipulation and the glaring bias of a corrupt judge. It was a battle for more than just a material inheritance. It was a fight for her mother's dignity, for her own autonomy, and for the very principle of justice. The discovery of her mother's hidden life in naval intelligence and the secrets of Operation Kingfisher provided her not with a weapon for destruction, but with a key to unlocking the chains of a rigged system and forcing a confrontation on her own terms. Her ultimate victory was multifaceted. In the immediate sense, she preserved her mother's legacy, securing the modest home and peace that Eleanor had built for herself. Legally, she won, but her true triumph was far deeper. She broke the cycle of manipulation and control that had defined her relationship with her father. By using the leverage of the past with restraint, she demonstrated a wisdom that surpassed both his ruthlessness and any simple desire for revenge. In the aftermath, Judith did not become defined by her conflict. Instead, she channeled her experience into purpose, founding the Eleanor Parker Justice Initiative. This allowed her to transform her personal pain into a public good, protecting others from similar predation. She built a life of profound personal contentment, a loving marriage, a family of her own, and a hard-won peace that was entirely her own creation. Her final, quiet encounters with her father illustrated the completion of her arc. There was no dramatic reconciliation, but a mutual, unspoken acknowledgement. He saw the fulfilled life she had built without him, and she found the capacity to release the last vestiges of her anger, recognizing him as a diminished figure from a closed chapter. The story concludes with Judith Parker not as a warrior, but as a fulfilled woman and a legacy builder. The hidden compartment in the antique desk is finally empty, its secrets having served their purpose. The weapons have been put away. The love, however, remains, passed down from Eleanor to Judith, and from Judith to her own daughter. The final lesson is that the greatest inheritance is not wealth or notoriety, but the strength to define one's own story and the peace to live it. Her story ends with the quiet hum of a happy, ordinary life, the most extraordinary victory of all.